All right, welcome to the Explainer. So today we're going to be diving into a scriptural instruction manual that lays out a very specific blueprint for marriage and family. And it looks at them not as something, society just made up, but as something ordained by God himself. So right off the bat, the source text frames this as way more than just a nice saying. It's not a suggestion, it's presented as a core command that everything else is built on. Okay, so let's dive into what that means. So the whole idea is that marriage and family aren't things we humans came up with and can, tweak as we go along. Nope. The idea here is that they're part of a fixed design, established right from the get-go. Okay, so to really get a handle on this framework, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning, back to what the text calls the original blueprint in Genesis. So this guide basically says these four features are the non-negotiables for what marriage is. It's like a step-by-step process, right? You start with male and female, then a man has to leave his parents to create a new primary bond. Then he commits to his wife, and finally they become this complete one-flesh union. And get this, that third step, cleaving, is super important. The Hebrew word here is debak, and we're not just talking about, sticking together. The source explains this word means a powerful, permanent, all-in kind of bond. In fact, it's the same word used to describe how Israel was supposed to be devoted to God. So that's a pretty big deal. Okay, so we've got this foundation, but what does it actually look like in practice? Well, according to this framework, it all leads to a really specific structure of roles inside the marriage. And these roles, they aren't just random. They're meant to be a living, breathing picture, a great mystery, as the text calls it, of the relationship between Christ and the church. So if you think about it from this perspective, every marriage is actually a public statement about something way, way bigger. And if you want to see where the text puts the weight, just look at that key passage in Ephesians 5. It's fascinating. You get 9 whole verses of instructions aimed directly at the husband, and then just 4 for the wife. So looking at those numbers, the argument from the source is that the real heavy lifting in this passage, the primary burden, actually falls on the man's shoulders, on his leadership and his huge responsibility to love his wife sacrificially. Okay, this is a really crucial point the text makes. It draws a sharp line in the sand. Headship isn't about being a dictator or ruling for your own benefit. Not at all. It's defined as servant leadership, modeled on how Christ sacrificed himself for the good of the church. So it's for the good of the wife. And on the flip side, you have the word for submit, which is hupotasso. The text explains this isn't about one person being less valuable than the other. It's a military term, actually, about arranging things in the proper order. And what's really interesting is that the source points out it's the same word used to describe Christ's relationship to God the Father. It's about order, not about worth. All right, so with all that foundational stuff in place, creation, covenant, these specific roles, it naturally leads to some very direct answers for 2 of the biggest topics out there: divorce and parenting. So let's tackle the tough one first, divorce. With everything we've heard about permanence and cleaving, how does this framework deal with that? Well, it points straight to what Christ says in Matthew 19. The standard is permanence, period. But it does highlight that there's one very narrow exception given for sexual immorality, that word porneia. But that's it. It's not for, we just don't get along anymore or we fell out of love. Okay, so what about kids? The fruit of the marriage. This framework sees parenting as a central core responsibility of the covenant. It's not just something that happens by accident or is treated like a lifestyle choice. And when it comes to discipline, it lays out 2 main tools: the rod, which is about addressing behavior with physical consequences, and reproof, which is about using words to help a child understand why their behavior was wrong. The idea is you need both. One corrects the action, the other instructs the heart. And together, that's what's meant to build wisdom. So finally, let's tie all of this together. The text argues that the family, the household, isn't just a private little unit. It actually has a public purpose that goes way beyond its own 4 walls. And this quote from 1 Timothy is held up as Exhibit A. The family is basically the training ground, the proving ground for leadership. The logic is pretty straightforward. If a man can't lead his own house well, how on earth could he be trusted to take care of the church?
So here's the bottom line, the ultimate point. In this framework, a family that's working the way it's designed to, a husband leading like Christ, a wife responding like the church, that family becomes a living, breathing advertisement for the gospel every single day.
And that really leaves us with one big question to chew on as we wrap up. You have this framework that's presented as timeless, set up right at the beginning. So, how does that interact with all the different complex questions and cultures we have today? That's a huge question to think about. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.